After the American Civil War, the country didn't just, rebuild. It basically exploded. In just a few decades, this absolute whirlwind of industry, immigration, and conflict just completely remade the nation, forging the America we recognize today. So let's dive into the incredible forces that defined this transformation.
So at the heart of this whole period is this massive head-on collision of forces. Right on one side, you've got these titans of industry and technology just pushing for growth, growth, growth at any cost. And on the other side, you've got reformers and everyday people fighting for a society that's more just, more fair. The question is, how did this epic struggle shape the America we're all living in right now?
Okay, so first, let's just try to get our heads around the sheer scale of the change we're talking about. This wasn't some minor adjustment. No, this was a ground-up reinvention of the country, and it was all driven by steel, steam, and just unbelievable ambition.
Now, if you're looking for the one thing that kickstarted it all, it was the railroad. I mean, the railroad wasn't just a piece of new tech. It was the engine of change. Suddenly, by connecting the coasts, you have a single massive American market for the very first time. And that creates this just voracious appetite for steel to build the tracks, coal to power the engines, and it meant farmers and miners way out west could finally ship their goods back east. It connected everything.
And, of course, with a boom this big came the titans who controlled it all. You know the names, guys like John D. Rockefeller in oil and Andrew Carnegie in steel. They became unimaginably wealthy, basically by dominating their entire industries. I mean, these guys weren't just successful businessmen, they controlled the very building blocks of the new American economy.
So, how'd they do it? Well, their key weapon was something called the trust. It was a really clever, kind of sneaky legal arrangement. Picture this. A bunch of supposedly rival companies all secretly agree to let the same small group of guys run the show. So to you, the public, it looks like there's competition. But behind the scenes, one group is pulling all the strings, setting whatever prices they want, and just absolutely crushing any real rivals that pop up.
But all of this explosive growth, well, it came at a staggering human cost. This progress was often paid for by the poor, by the immigrant, and by the marginalized people in society.
You know, the American dream was this incredibly powerful magnet, drawing people from all over the world. But the experience you had really depended on where you came from. For most Europeans arriving at Ellis Island in New York, the process was pretty quick, in and out, sometimes in a matter of hours. But for Asian immigrants, mostly Chinese, arriving at Angel Island in San Francisco, it was often a total nightmare. We're talking long detentions, harsh interrogations. The whole system was pretty much designed to keep them out.
And that prejudice went way beyond just the processing centers. This new wave of immigrants, people from Italy, Poland, Russia, all over Asia, they faced intense hostility. To the people already here, they looked different, they spoke different languages, they had different religions, and a lot of folks saw them as a threat to the so-called American way of life.
At the exact same time as the nation is pushing westward, it comes into brutal, tragic conflict with the people who were already living there. The Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876 was this stunning but temporary victory for the Lakota and Cheyenne tribes, but it was fleeting. Just 14 years later, the Wounded Knee Massacre marked the horrific, tragic end of any large-scale armed resistance from Native Americans on the plains.
Now, for African Americans, the end of the Civil War was supposed to mean freedom and equality. But in 1896, the Supreme Court delivered this absolutely devastating blow with just 3 words: separate but equal. It was, of course, a complete legal fiction, and it basically gave the green light to decades of racial segregation and discrimination.
And that Supreme Court decision gave legal cover to the system we now know as Jim Crow. And listen, this wasn't just about separate water fountains. This was a whole system of laws and social codes designed from the ground up to enforce white supremacy. It was about denying Black Americans their right to vote, to get a good education, and to even exist safely in public spaces.
But here's the thing. People didn't just accept this new reality. They fought back. In response to all the corruption, the inequality, the suffering, a powerful wave of reform movements rose up to demand real change.
And you know who became the conscience of this new movement? A group of investigative journalists who got the nickname muckrakers. These were people like Upton Sinclair, who exposed a disgusting truth about the meatpacking industry, and Ida Tarbell, who took on Rockefeller's oil monopoly. They wrote these shocking, deeply researched stories that literally forced the public to confront the ugly reality behind all the glitz of the Gilded Age.
And who was at the forefront of so many of these fights? Women. Absolutely.
From Francis Willard's campaign to ban alcohol, to Susan B. Anthony's tireless, lifelong fight for women's right to vote, to Jane Addams, who created settlement houses to help immigrants get on their feet, women were the organizers, the activists, and the moral force driving so much of the progressive era's agenda. And in the face of Jim Crow's brutality, a powerful new organization emerged. The NAACP was founded to fight back, strategically, through the courts, through lobbying Congress, through public education. This was a critical new phase in the long struggle for civil rights, creating a permanent institution to challenge systemic racism head-on. Reformers also fought to fix a political system they saw as totally broken and basically owned by corporations. So they introduced these really powerful new ideas, like the secret ballot, to stop bosses from intimidating workers at the polls. And they created tools like the initiative and the referendum, which for the first time allowed regular citizens to bypass corrupt politicians and vote directly on laws themselves. It was about taking power back.
And, for the first time really, the nation started to think about its environmental future. This was led by President Theodore Roosevelt, who was a passionate outdoorsman. The conservation movement was born. He set aside millions upon millions of acres for national parks and forests, arguing that the country's natural wonders were a treasure to be protected, not just a resource to be stripped bare and exploited.
Now, all this internal chaos and change, it wasn't happening in a bubble. As America grew into an industrial giant at home, it started to flex its muscles on the world stage, completely transforming its role in global affairs.
Theodore Roosevelt, again, fundamentally changed American foreign policy with what's called his Roosevelt Corollary. He basically declared that the U.S. had the right to intervene in the business of its neighbors in Latin America to keep order. In practice, this meant the U.S. was now claiming the role of the hemisphere's policeman, whether anyone asked for one or not. And nothing symbolized this new American power more than the Panama Canal. It's a crazy story. When Colombia refused to give the U.S. the rights to build it, the U.S. just supported a rebellion, helped create the brand new country of Panama, and then got the deal it wanted from them. It was this stunning, in-your-face display of America's newfound industrial might and, frankly, its imperial ambition.
So there you have it. This period forged a new, a powerful, a modern America. But it also left behind this really complex legacy. The progressive reformers, they won incredible victories, for sure. But think about it. So many of the issues they were fighting over, the power of corporations, racial inequality, arguments about immigration, America's role in the world, aren't these the exact same battles we're still fighting today?